If you have diabetes and you eat eggs for breakfast, you may be doing something every single morning that is pushing your blood sugar higher than it should be. And you have no idea it's happening. Not because eggs are bad for you, they're not. Not because your doctor gave you wrong advice, they probably didn't, but because no one, not your endocrinologist, not your nutritionist, not the pamphlet they handed you at diagnosis, ever told you that how you eat eggs matters just as much as whether you eat them. And for a diabetic body, the difference between those two things is not small. It's the difference between a morning that sets your blood sugar on a stable, controlled path, and a morning that sends it spiking in a direction you can't see and can't feel until the damage is already accumulating. That's what this video is about. Not fear, precision. My name is Dr. Elena Marsh. I've spent over 2 decades in clinical practice working with patients managing type 2 diabetes. And for much of that time, I watched the same pattern repeat itself. A patient comes in with decent lab numbers, motivated, eating what they believe is a healthy breakfast, eggs, maybe some toast, coffee, following the rules, but their post-meal glucose is climbing more than it should. Their A1C isn't moving the way we'd expect. And when I sit down with them and go through exactly what they're doing, step by step from the moment they wake up, we find it. Every time. It's not the egg itself. It's the combination. It's the timing. It's the preparation method. It's what's sitting on the plate next to it. A 2020 review published in Nutrients analyzed over 30 clinical studies on egg consumption in people with type 2 diabetes and found something critical. The glycemic response to an egg-containing meal varied dramatically, not based on how many eggs were consumed, but based on what those eggs were paired with and how they were cooked. That distinction is what most diabetes education materials miss entirely. And if you've been managing your blood sugar carefully, trying to do everything right, you deserve to know exactly what that distinction means for your body. Quick question before we go further. When you eat eggs for breakfast, what do you usually eat them with? Write it in the comments right now. Bread, toast, fruit, nothing? I read every single one, and your answer will tell me a lot about what we need to cover today. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your body when you eat breakfast with diabetes, because the egg conversation doesn't make sense unless you understand the system it's working inside. When you wake up in the morning, your body has already been doing something for several hours without you knowing. Between roughly 4 a.m. and 8 a.m., your liver begins releasing stored glucose into your bloodstream. At the same time, your adrenal glands release cortisol, a hormone that prepares your body to face the day by raising blood sugar levels. This is called the dawn phenomenon, and it happens in every human being. But in a body with type 2 diabetes, the insulin response to that early morning glucose surge is impaired. Your cells don't respond to insulin the way they should. So you're already starting your morning in a higher glucose state than a non-diabetic person. And your body's capacity to pull that glucose back down is limited. That is the landscape your breakfast lands on. What you eat in that first meal of the day, and critically, how you eat it, doesn't just affect your blood sugar for the next 2 hours. Research published in Diabetes Care has shown that the glycemic response to your first meal of the day has a measurable second meal effect, meaning it influences how your body processes glucose at lunch. A breakfast that spikes your blood sugar doesn't just create a problem at 8 a.m. It creates a disadvantage your body is working against until early afternoon. So when we talk about eggs and diabetes, we're not talking about a single food in isolation. We're talking about a lever, a morning lever, that can either work with your metabolism or silently work against it. And most people with diabetes are pulling that lever in the wrong direction without knowing it. Stay with me, because in the next section, I'm going to show you exactly how that happens, which combinations are quietly raising your blood sugar right now, and what the research says about why the way eggs are prepared changes everything. So let's talk about what's actually going wrong and why it keeps happening, even when you think you're doing everything right. The egg itself is, metabolically speaking, close to ideal for someone with diabetes. It contains 0 carbohydrates. It's rich in protein and fat, both of which slow gastric emptying, meaning they help delay the rate at which glucose enters your bloodstream after a meal. If you ate a plain egg with nothing else, your blood sugar response would be minimal. That's not the problem. The problem is what surrounds the egg. Most people with diabetes who eat eggs for breakfast eat them with something starchy. Toast, a slice of bread, a tortilla, hash browns, a small bowl of fruit on the side. Sometimes all of the above. And here is where the biology turns against you. Because the presence of egg protein and fat does not neutralize the glycemic impact of those carbohydrates. It modifies it. It slows it. But it does not stop it. And slowing a spike is not the same as preventing one. When you eat refined carbohydrates alongside eggs, white bread, for example, your digestive system begins breaking down those starches into glucose almost immediately. The fat and protein from the egg slow that process slightly, which means instead of a sharp, fast spike, you get a slower, more prolonged rise in blood sugar. For a non-diabetic, that distinction barely matters. For a diabetic body with impaired insulin response, a prolonged glucose rise is sometimes more damaging than a fast one, because your system doesn't have the capacity to clear it efficiently at any speed. This is the trap. You eat what feels like a balanced, protein-rich breakfast. You don't feel a dramatic sugar crash. You assume everything is fine, but your continuous glucose monitor, if you have one, tells a different story. And if you don't have one, you simply don't see it happening. Now let's talk about preparation, because this is the part that almost no one discusses, and the research here is unambiguous. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition examined how different cooking methods affected the glycemic and insulin response in people with impaired glucose metabolism. The findings were clear. Fried eggs, cooked in butter, oil, or any added fat at high heat, produced a measurably higher insulin demand than boiled or poached eggs made from the same ingredient. The mechanism is oxidative stress at the molecular level. When egg yolk is exposed to high heat in the presence of fat, the cholesterol in the yolk begins to oxidize. Oxidized cholesterol compounds trigger a low-grade inflammatory response in the arterial walls, and inflammation in a diabetic body directly worsens insulin resistance. This means that 2 people with diabetes can eat the exact same egg from the same carton at the same time of morning, and one of them, simply because of how they cooked it, is putting more strain on their insulin system than the other. That is not a small difference. That is a daily compounding variable that accumulates over months and years. And if you've been frying your eggs every morning because you thought it didn't matter, you didn't know. Now you do. That changes everything. There's a second risk connected to this that most people never hear about, and it runs deeper than blood sugar. Chronic post-meal glucose spikes, even moderate ones, even ones you don't feel, cause direct damage to the endothelium. That's the thin inner lining of your blood vessels. Every time blood sugar rises sharply and your vessels are exposed to that glucose load, microscopic inflammation occurs in that lining. Over time, this is how diabetes contributes to cardiovascular disease, not through one dramatic event, but through thousands of small, invisible insults to your vascular system, one breakfast at a time. A landmark analysis published in The Lancet followed over 11,000 people with type 2 diabetes across multiple countries and found that post-meal glucose spikes, not fasting glucose, not A1C alone, were the strongest independent predictor of cardiovascular mortality in diabetic patients. More predictive than total cholesterol, more predictive than blood pressure. What you eat at breakfast, and how, is directly connected to how long and how well your heart functions. That is not a metaphor. That is the mechanism. Has your doctor ever explained the connection between how you cook your eggs and your cardiovascular risk? Write never or yes in the comments right now. So, to summarize what your body is navigating every morning, you wake up with elevated glucose from the dawn phenomenon. Your insulin response is already compromised, And then you sit down to a breakfast that, if built the wrong way, adds a prolonged glucose rise on top of an already stressed system while simultaneously triggering low-grade vascular inflammation through oxidized fats. That is not bad luck. That is a sequence of events, and sequences can be interrupted. Stay with me, because what I'm about to give you addresses every single step of that sequence. It's a protocol you can start tomorrow morning. It costs nothing. It requires no new foods, no supplements, no equipment, just a specific order of operations that your metabolism has been waiting for. Here is exactly what I want you to do. Starting tomorrow morning. This is called the Diabetic Egg Reset, a 4-step morning protocol built specifically around how your metabolism works after 60 with type 2 diabetes. Every step is free, every step is grounded in published research, and every step addresses one specific point in the sequence we just mapped out. The dawn phenomenon, the cooking method, the pairing problem, and the vascular inflammation risk. You will be able to say the 4 steps out loud by the time this video ends. That matters, because a protocol you can remember is a protocol you will actually use. Step 1, water before anything else. The moment you wake up, before coffee, before medication, before you touch the stove, drink 8 ounces of water. That is 1 full glass, room temperature or warm, not cold. Here is why this matters for your body specifically. During sleep, you fast for 7 to 9 hours. Your blood becomes measurably more viscous, thicker, overnight, because you haven't been hydrating. In a diabetic body, thicker blood means glucose circulates less efficiently, and the cells responsible for insulin signaling are operating in a more concentrated, less responsive environment. A 2019 study published in Diabetes and Metabolic Syndrome found that adequate morning hydration before the first meal measurably improved post-meal glucose clearance in type 2 diabetic patients compared to those who ate first and drank later, 1 glass of water, before anything else, every morning. This step takes 30 seconds. It costs nothing, and it prepares the metabolic environment your breakfast is about to land in. Step 2. Cook with heat, not with fat. Poach your eggs, boil them, or scramble them in a non-stick pan with no added oil or butter. If you use a pan, use a light mist of water instead of fat to prevent sticking. Never fry. This is the step most people resist, and the one that makes the largest biological difference. As we covered, high heat cooking in the presence of fat oxidizes the cholesterol in the egg yolk. Oxidized cholesterol compounds, called oxysterols, are directly pro-inflammatory. In a diabetic body, where low-grade systemic inflammation is already elevated, adding dietary oxysterols to your morning meal is like adding fuel to a fire that's already burning. When you remove added fat from the cooking process and lower the effective heat through poaching or boiling, you eliminate that oxidation almost entirely. The egg's protein, healthy fats, and micronutrients remain intact. The inflammatory burden disappears. The preparation time difference between a fried egg and a poached egg is less than 2 minutes. The biological difference, compounded daily over a year, is not small. Step 3. Build the plate in the right order. Before your egg touches your plate, put your non-starchy vegetables down first. Leafy greens, sliced cucumber, half an avocado, a handful of cherry tomatoes, any combination. The egg goes on top of or beside those vegetables. No bread, no toast, no starchy side. Here is the mechanism your body needs you to understand. Fiber, the kind found in non-starchy vegetables, acts as a physical buffer in your digestive tract. When fiber is present in the stomach before carbohydrates are digested, it slows the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream. This is called the fiber-first effect, and it is one of the most well-documented interventions in diabetes nutrition research. But there's a second mechanism at work here that's even more important for a diabetic morning specifically. Non-starchy vegetables contain virtually no glucose load of their own. By replacing the starchy component of your breakfast, the toast, the bread, the hash browns, with fiber-rich vegetables, you are not just slowing a glucose rise. you are eliminating its primary source entirely. A clinical trial published in Diabetes Care found that substituting vegetables for refined carbohydrates at breakfast reduced 2-hour post-meal glucose by an average of 29% in type 2 diabetic patients without any change in medication, insulin dose, or total calorie intake. 29% from a plate change, starting tomorrow. Step 4. Walk for 10 minutes after you eat within 30 minutes of finishing your breakfast. Not an hour later, not after your second cup of coffee. Stand up and walk, outside if possible. Around your home if not. 10 minutes. Slow and steady. This is the step that closes the loop, and the one most people skip because it doesn't feel like medicine. It is. When you use your large muscle groups, your legs, your glutes, immediately after eating, those muscles begin pulling glucose out of the bloodstream for energy. They do this through a mechanism that is partially independent of insulin. In a body where insulin resistance is limiting normal glucose clearance, activating this muscle-driven uptake pathway is not optional. It is the difference between your post-meal blood sugar coming down cleanly or staying elevated for the next 3 to 4 hours. A 2022 study published in Sports Medicine found that a 10-minute walk taken within 30 minutes of a meal reduced post-meal glucose peaks by up to 22% in people with type 2 diabetes, a result comparable to some pharmaceutical interventions with 0 side effects. 10 minutes, after every breakfast. That is the final step of the Diabetic Egg Reset. Let me say the 4 steps one more time so they are locked in before we close. The Diabetic Egg Reset: water, 1 glass before anything else. Cook without fat, poach, boil, or dry scramble. Vegetables first, no starch on the plate. Walk for 10 minutes within 30 minutes of eating 4 steps. 0 cost, every single morning. That is what your metabolism has been waiting for. You came into this video thinking eggs might be the problem. You're leaving, knowing the egg was never the enemy. The preparation was, the pairing was, the sequence of your morning was. And now you have a name for the solution, 4 steps in the right order, and the science behind every single one of them. That cost you 20 minutes. The damage that builds silently, meal after meal, morning after morning, in the blood vessels of someone who didn't know, that accumulates over years. 20 minutes is a reasonable trade. You now know what the dawn phenomenon does to your blood sugar before you even sit down to eat. You know why a fried egg carries an inflammatory cost that a poached egg doesn't. You know that the fiber-first principle isn't a wellness trend. It's a documented clinical intervention. And you know that a 10-minute walk after breakfast is, by the research, comparable to pharmaceutical intervention in its effect on post-meal glucose. Start tomorrow, 1 glass of water, a poached egg, vegetables on the plate before anything starchy touches it. 10 minutes of walking after you finish. That is the Diabetic Egg Reset. And it begins in the morning. There is someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a friend over 60, who eats eggs every morning with diabetes and has never once heard any of this. This video can reach them before the morning it matters most. Please share it with them today. Not for this channel, for them. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now. Every week, I bring honest, research-based information about what your body needs after 60. The information I wish every patient had before they ended up sitting across from me. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. A note before you go. Everything I've shared today is based on published research and more than 2 decades of clinical experience working with patients managing type 2 diabetes. It is not a substitute for your personal medical care. Your body has a history that I don't have access to. Your medications, your current glucose levels, your other conditions. Before making any changes to your morning routine, your diet, or anything related to your diabetes management, please speak with your own doctor first. Bring this information into that conversation. Show them the studies. Ask the questions. That is exactly where good medicine begins. Not in a 10-minute appointment that ran out of time, but in a conversation between you and someone who knows your full picture. That conversation is yours to start. Now you have something to bring to it.